Axşamınız xeyir, hörmətli tələbələr. Hər birinizi salamlayıram. Mənim insan hüquqları ilə bağlı əvvəldən də danışdığımız kimi sizlə müzakirəmiz baş tutmalıdır bugün. Bir şey nəzərinizə çatdırım ki, hal-hazırda mən çalışmışam ki, siz məndən, yəni mənim özümdən daha çox slaytlarımı ekranda görəsiniz. Çünki bizim müzakirəmizdə bu 2 saat ərzində, yəni saat 5-dən başlayaraq saat 7-yə kimi 2 mövzu, insan hüquqlarının 2 mövzusu əsasında gedəcək. Bunlardan biri, deməli, adı gedir, ayrı-ayrı qrupların, yəni ayrı-ayrı əhali qruplarının hüquqlarının müdafiəsi. Həmçinin əgər çatdırsaq, bizim bir dənə də mövzumuz var. Bu mövzuda insan hüquqlarının əsas giriş mövzularından biridir və o da ayrı-ayrı hüquqların səciyyəsi və tənzimlənməsi adlanır. Biz sizinlə bu dərsləri ingilis dilində tədris elədiyimizə görə mövzuları da ingilis dilində sizə izah edəcəm. Sadəcə istəyərdim Azərbaycan dilində kiçik bir giriş eləyim və daha sonra ingilis dilinə keçək. Mənə olan suallarınızı və s. hamısını həm belə deyək, ünvanlaya bilərsiniz chat lövhəsində orada. Həmçinin də WhatsApp vasitəsilə də tələbələrin əksəriyyəti mənim nömrəmi bilirlər və onlar mənə müəyyən müraciətlərini eləyə bilərlər. Çalışacağım sizlə slaytlar ətrafında danışaq. Eyni vaxtda həm slaytları, həm də ki, məni görməyinizi mən özüm istəmədim və indi də çalışıram ki, burada mən bəlkə balaca bir pəncərədə öz görüntümü də sizə təqdim eləyə bilim. Hələ ki alınmır, bilmirəm niyə görə, amma ən azından mən şadam ki, siz slaytları görə bilirsiniz, çünki slaytların ətrafında sizlə danışacağım. O cümlədən burada kommentariya rəy hissəsi var. Firavan xanım artıq salam yazıb. Salam Firavan xanım. Yenə deyirəm, biz slaytlar ətrafında danışacağıq və suallarınız olduqca mən vaxtaşırı rəy hissəsinə bura baxacağım. Və əgər nəsə lazım olsa, yenə də orada cavablandıracağım sizə. Okay, so let's start to discuss our two main topics. One of them is about the characteristics of different human rights. The second one is the analysis of rights of certain groups of people. So why I chose these two ones, because we have very close and very broad range of linkages between these two topics. So I need to just discuss them together, even I can mix them. And so I think we need to start with our first slide. So you can ask me a question regarding why all of this, slides language is not in English but in Azerbaijani. And my answer is that as it was in my previous years, I prefer to deliver lectures in English, but at the same time I want you to understand all of this information also in Azerbaijani. And therefore you can just listen me and you can read these slides over here on your screen. And at the same time you can listen me and I'm gonna translate them and I will explain you them in English. So you will be able to get the idea both in Azerbaijani and in English language. Sorry for interruption. Okay then, so as you know, human rights is one of the historical branches of international law. And as you see here, the sources of national and international law are both applicable to the human rights field too. So our first idea is about just a short reminder to you about the sources of human rights, because our last real life lecture at Law Faculty of Baku State University was dedicated to this topic, to the theoretical basis of human rights, including the sources of human rights law. So as you see here, the very primary sources of human rights can be divided into two groups. One of them are the national law sources, and the second one is international law sources. So basically, most of the human rights law areas are based on the sources of international law, but not national law. And we can say that only after the implementation of international sources to national law, we can talk about the national sources, the national human rights sources. But again, all of the fields, all of the forms, and all of the typology of these sources are both applicable to international human rights law and to the national human rights law. So let's start with the very famous and outstanding one. It's international treaties. We know them under the name of international conventions. So the basic conventions in, let's say, in human rights law are the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was adopted under the shield of United Nations, and the two covenants of civil and political rights, and the economic, social, and cultural rights. Okay, so international treaties are the written form of source in international human rights field, and it's the same for the this one, the case law. We use the term case law, but the more precise term is the decisions of courts or court decisions. Like, without imagining court decisions, we cannot talk about the case law of different international human rights mechanisms. So the case law is also a very outstanding form of sources in international human rights law. Well, basically we talk about the case law of European Court of Human Rights, but there are several of them in the field of human rights. Like, for example, in America we have Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and for example in African region we have another court by name the EU Court of Justice. The African Court of Justice. So although its name is about justice, it deals with human rights issues too. But like, especially for Azerbaijan, if we talk about Azerbaijan as a European country, we need to talk about the European Court of Human Rights and its case law. Okay, what about this one? It is also a very interesting one. It is international customary law or international customs. They are the unwritten forms of law norms, like they are formulated upon the basis of commonly accepted traditions in the field of law. Understand? So it is also very important to take into account international customs, especially when these customs are included to the content of international treaties and to the content of the case law. So although we say that this source is an unwritten and oral source, nowadays currently the very ideas of the international customs are included to international treaties and the case law. Yeah. Then we have the secondary sources. We call them secondary because they are kind of helpful to these ones, understand? So in the absence of these three ones, we cannot talk freely about the doctrinal opinions, the opinions of famous scientists. We usually call them commentary And even in the national law fields like civil law or criminal law fields, we talk about the commentary of courts, commentary of criminal law, commentary of civil procedural law, etc. It's the same for the general principles of law. So general principles of law, they are written forms of law, but they are the principles, the very fundamental ideas that are applicable for all of the fields of law. And finally, although you cannot find this in the system of sources described in most of international law books, we have very interesting national law norms that are applicable for the international law relations. Like you can see this in the field of international investment or in the field of alternative dispute resolution. In these fields, you will find the case that when the court is gonna deal with a case, especially on the basis of national law norms. Okay, so just keep in mind again that all of these 6, and sometimes scientists add here the 7th or 8th one as the sanctions of the international organizations. So all of these are the basic sources of human rights. And it's just a short reminder just to warm up and to enter the current topic of us. So again, it's the same in national law field. Like international treaties, they are not treaties in national law. The name is normative act, like laws or decrees of the president. Just let me check any kind of questions. Okay, it's just greetings and hello. So again, so it's about normative legal act. It has 2 forms. Like non-normative legal acts also exist in the field of national law. Usually they are decisions or the recommendations issued by the central authorities, or we call them in Azerbaijan executive authorities. So that's also a very good idea. For example, a very good example of this is the current samples of decisions issued by the virus on fighting against coronavirus in the framework of the Cabinet of Ministers. So this Office of Emergence, let's call it like this, Office of Emergence. As you see, you can check from the website, official website of the Cabinet of Ministers. They have issued plenty of decisions as recommendations or the supplementary decisions to regulate the daily life of people and fighting against this virus. But they are, as a character of these decisions and recommendations, they are not normative legal acts. We can just call them normative acts and it's enough. And in national law, we can talk again about, this one, customs. And we can talk about case law, we can talk about the comments and etc. Why I put here this etc. Because again, the field of human rights is very specific, and usually the documents that do not fall under the system of all of these ones, but they can be applicable still, they can be useful in terms of human rights implementation. For example, we have programs, state programs, understand. Although they are in the form of decrees, but still these programs, they are programs and we should call them programs, not just decrees, understand. So I think that it's enough about the sources of human rights. In international law level, in terms of human rights, we have a very interesting chain of 3 different international documents. All of them are the documents of the United Nations, and according to scholars, we can name them International Constitution of the Human Rights, or as I've mentioned here, It's International Bill of Human Rights. So the very reason why we call them Constitution or International Bill is that probably almost all of human rights that you can think about, all of them are included or are hidden in the norms of these three documents. The very fundamental of them is 1948 Declaration. It's Universal Declaration on Human Rights. So it's a very fundamental one, and it's considered as a most important document in terms of international human rights sources. Although I need to indicate or mention as an African Charter on Rights and Duties of Citizens and People. So it is a regional human rights document issued by the Organization of African Union, and currently it is considered, it is appreciated as a most professionally developed document of human rights. But again, the very historical root of human rights starts from here. It's a 1948 document. Then in 1966, some 10 or 15 years later, the international legislators, they decided to divide human rights. So they decided to talk about economic, social and cultural rights together, apart from civil and political rights. So you can ask me a question, why we have such kind of a decision, why legislators decided to divide them into two groups, what's the reason? Well, I'm gonna explain it like this, like civil and political rights, I will explain them later individually, like one by one. Civil and political rights, they are the rights that should be implemented immediately, like automatically, understand? And civil and political rights are kind of very strict obligations over the states that should be implemented without delay. And however, when it comes to this group of rights, namely the social, economic, social, cultural rights, when it comes to these ones, so states must ensure them within the limits of their resources, understand? So the term resources has nothing to do with these civil and political rights, but economic, financial or human resources are the key word in the implementation of economic, social and cultural rights. So just keep in mind when someone asks you about the division and the reasons, you should explain it like this. Then we have very variety of ways of implementation. So at first we need to explain what the term implementation itself means. What's the meaning? What's the meaning and essence of implementation? So implementation is kind of, in very simple words, it's just taking international norms on human rights and putting them in national law systems of countries. Understand? So, for example, in countries like the Netherlands, you don't need any special act what will bring international norms to national law. You don't need a special act in the Netherlands to implement all of these international law norms, and we call it like automatic incorporation. It's over here, yeah. And in Azerbaijan language, you can read carefully the explanations that I've given here. So it's a type of automatic incorporation. So what does it mean? It means that you don't need any special act. It's over here, yeah. You don't need any special act about the implementation. It's useless. understand? And we have ad hoc incorporation. It's also a type of automatic delivery of international law norms and national law, but they are applied only in ad hoc situations. So the Latin term ad hoc, it means that, it is only in individual cases, that you don't need to apply ad hoc situations very oftenly. It's useless. Ad hoc situations can happen in terms of conflicts, in terms of war, in terms of emergency situations, etc. Understand? So the very term incorporation, it means that you don't need any special act. International law norms, it's written here. International law norms, they are implemented by the national law systems automatically, and there is no need document that is supplementary to this process. Okay, another meaning of it's here. Another meaning of the term implementation. What does it mean? It means, it's here. In Azerbaijan, we call it uzlaştırma. Like in very simple terms, implementation is a tool to build friendly relations between national law and international law. Again, like uzlaştırma, it means not adaptation, but just very simply building some close friendly relations between two parts of law, the national law and the international law. Understand? It could be like this. And also we can replace it with the other term, balancing, building a golden balance between international and national law. It's also very applicable to the meaning of the term implementation. Okay, another way of implementing human rights that is also applicable for the Azerbaijani law system, it's transformation. Like, okay, honestly, I belong to the group of scientists who claim that in Azerbaijan we have both incorporation and transformation. But in most of the international law books in Azerbaijan, you will find an idea saying that in Azerbaijan we prefer transformation. It's over here. Yeah, it's this one. Transformation. So what's the meaning of transformation? Probably you watched the film Transformers. It's very child-friendly film, and I really love all of this series of these films. So as you can see in this film, the heroes of this film, they are transformers. They can be cars, and then they can be transformed to very huge robots. Understand? So the term transformation in terms of transformers from the film heroes, it's the same in national law, international law. Like transformation, it means that you as legislator takes international law norms and transforms them to the national law. Just transforming them. It's like in Universal Declaration you read an article, and then you decide to put this article into your constitution. So that's a very good explanation of transformation. Understand? And then we need to talk about the results of the implementation. Why states should implement these law norms, why states should obey to the international law norms. Just simply because they have international obligations. Understand? Let me just highlight it again. International obligations, what's the meaning of obligations? They are mandatory rules. I'm talking about the obligations. They are the mandatory rules for all of states without exception. Although we have countries like North Korea, or Iran, who sometimes refuse to obey some of these mandatory rules. But let's talk about the vast majority of countries. Just let me check it again. So there is no any. Okay. Can you read the slides, or do I just have a problem? I don't know, maybe you have a problem because I don't know how else I can be helpful to you, because a maximum quality, yeah, it's very limited quality, and like honestly, it's not my fault that it's just 306 pixels. Of course it's not my fault. I just tried to just demonstrate these slides. Of course I will send them to you too, but again, I have nothing to do with this quality problems. Just excuse me, guys. Okay, I will do my best to read them and then translate them into Azerbaijani, because otherwise I don't know what to do else. So again, I'm talking about international obligations. So these obligations are divided into two groups. In Azerbaycan, their names are maddi öhdəliklər və implementasiya öhdəlikləri. So in Azerbaijan, in English, we translate them as the statutory obligations and implementary obligations, understand? Or the substantive, this one. It's substantive. Let me just highlight it again. It's substantive, this one. And with this one is implementary obligations. Okay. So substantive obligations are the obligations that are, how to name them? Like they are the vast majority of obligations derived from the international human rights. Understand? For example, I have given here an example of internet rights. Understand? It's mandatory and it's substantive obligation. Yeah. So what about the implementary obligations? These are the obligations that has a very, very procedural character. So what does it mean? It means that these obligations are kind of explaining states what to do and how to do. Understand? Procedural character, it means that, for example, states must realize the decisions of international courts. Yeah? So the realization of decisions of international courts, it's a very good example to implementary or procedural obligations. Okay. So, okay, turning back to this question, it's about maximum quality. So, in your houses, like I can advise you to listen to my lectures again, but first you need to just revise the slides. Just you can listen my. You can listen my speech again while watching your slides at home individually. And this is kind of an explanation and recommendation for you. Otherwise, I'm just thinking about what to do else, but I cannot find another solution to the problem. Okay, then let's get back to the slides. So, in terms of statutory or the substantive obligations, it's over here. We can talk about the division of obligations, division of substantive obligations. So the very first layer of the substantive obligations are respect to human rights. Understand? The respect, just respecting human rights, it's enough. Understand? The second layer is that protecting human rights. So you need to protect human rights. You just need to protect human rights. And the last one, after respecting, it's over here. After respecting and after protecting, you need to ensure or fulfill human rights, understand? And I provided here some samples to each of these obligations. For example, if you are not allowed to violate human rights, or you are not permitted to do something that's wrong to the virtue of human rights. So this is the meaning of respecting human rights. It's over here. Protecting human rights means that you protect the people from human rights violations. So it's kind of an active decision of you to protect human rights. And active decision means that you need to do something very actively. Like in terms of virus, we can see our police, they are acting very successfully in terms of protecting people, understand? And what about the last one, realizing or fulfilling human rights? This is based on the idea that you need to create enough conditions for people to enjoy their rights. For example, currently I'm delivering you a lecture. It's an online lecture, and it's your right to education. Like, very simply, you are enjoying your right to education, yeah, and I'm implementing, realizing my obligation. Yeah, that could be a very good example. What else? Okay, I will just stop here because I want just to switch to the other topic. I think that firstly you need to learn more about the individual human rights. Like, each of human rights are very useful to know. And then, after covering all of this, if we will have time, I'm gonna explain you something about the groups of human rights that it's over here, yeah. Group of human rights that belong to certain groups of people. Because although we have human rights that belong to all of people, in terms of special rights, we can address the special rights to special groups of people. For example, children, although they have all of the human rights that belong to everyone, children have their own special rights. For example, right to family care, understand? And what about youth? So youth, as a social layer, they have also a right to family care, but also they have a right to independence. I just remember my 18 or 19 years. I really used to fight for my independence. So in terms of financial independence and in terms of moral independence. Yeah. What about women? The most discriminative group within the society. Probably you know better than me what kind of human rights especially belong to women. Yeah, and it's the same for the minorities. We call them national ethnic minorities. It's the same for elderly people. It's the same for the disabled people. In Azerbaijan, we call them alillat. It's over here. Yeah, it's over here. But I prefer another term. In my opinion, the term or the word disabled, it's not so good. It's not so friendly. It's not so. Yeah, you can be seemed very rude or rough if you name someone as disabled. Therefore, I prefer another term. It's a very long term, but it is more friendly. Yeah. In English, let me just try to translate it. People that has untraditional, intellectual and physical development. People with untraditional or unusual intellectual and physical development. Understand? Also, we have rights of persons in prisons. Yeah, it's over here. Yeah, and then I put it etc. because each society in national level, they can have some additional groups to these ones. Okay. So, but before we need to talk about this, we need to talk about the civil rights, political rights, economic rights, social rights, and etc. Yeah. So let's start with this one. Just after warming up, let's start with this. Information about this, about certain human rights, you can find in our course book prepared by our dear Professor Amir Aliyev. In this book, that's a very good course book for us. Let me just show you. It's chapter 4, Dördüncü fasıl. It's chapter 4. So in chapter 4 you can find information about this, about all of these questions, And this one, the certain groups of people, human rights of certain groups of people. It is the next chapter, chapter 5 of the course book. Okay, let me just check questions. Are there any type of questions? I cannot see them. Yeah, but feel free anyway. So let's start with this one. That was chapter 4. The classification of human rights. I think we need to start with a classification. So what's the meaning of classification? Historically, people didn't recognize all of human rights at the same time. Firstly, they started to talk about the right to, in terms of politics, right to freedom of expression or free elections or something like this. But later they started to talk about the right to food or the other rights that can be applicable to the human rights generations. So what I have done and I have described in this slide, what I have done here. So firstly, I just tried to justify for you why we need to divide human rights. Because like originally human rights, it's over here. Yeah, it's over here. It's here. Originally human rights are universal and they are indivisible. And you can ask me a question, why, despite the fact of universality and indivisibility, we need still to group them? What's the reason? And my answer will be, if we want to analyze them, it's here, analyze them. And if we want to learn about certain human rights in depth, you need to group them, you need to divide them. And we have some criteria for making division between them. Originally, human rights are divided into 3 generations. So first generation, it's here. The second generation, it's here. And the third generation, it's here. Generations means that each of generations has its own features. For example, first generation is civil and political rights. It doesn't mean that civil and political rights are more important than the third generation. Of course, no. But civil and political rights, they are the first generation because they had been recognized by societies earlier than the collective rights or third generation of human rights. Understand? The civil and political rights are the results of the revolutions that ended the medieval centuries in Europe. Especially we can talk about the revolution in France, because that was the starting point of Enlightenment period in Europe. And we can talk about the revolution in Germany, understand? Also the technological revolution in England. Yeah, these 3 revolutions are type of fundamentals for the civil and political rights, understand? Then we can talk about the independence war in United States of America. It's also applicable for these ones. Let me just try to I just want you to show to see me. But I don't know what to do because like this is the only way that I know to show you in little screen. I just want you to know to see me. Unfortunately, I don't know what's the problem. I don't know what's the problem. Anyway, so let's turn back to our lovely slides. So second generation of human rights. Any questions? Yeah, no, any questions? So the second generation of human rights. These are economic, social, and cultural rights. Yeah, they emerged later than civil and political rights. Therefore, we call them second generation. Yeah, so it's here over here. The second generation of human rights. They are related to social insurance, or we call it social security. Yeah, so we can talk about the Soviet period because people love to call Soviet period as a period of social security. You know, pensions, free hospitals, free education, all of these issues were free. But I cannot agree with this because, you know, okay, I have my own political views, but still, the civil and political rights are just different from the economic, social, and cultural rights. Okay, what about the last one? Why we call them collective one? Because they are based on the very interesting term. In Azerbaijan, we call it hamdaylik. Yeah, this is a very key term to explain the term solidarity. You know, solidarity, what does it mean? It means that people with the same ideas can gather together and can constitute an organization. Yeah, collective rights. Collective rights are the right to environmental protection. You know, collective right is right to information, right to development. Yeah. And I have issued another classification. It's also a very interesting one. We have rights. In Azerbaijan, we call them mutlak hüquqlar. We have rights that cannot be derogated. You know, they are absolute rights. Yeah, just keep in mind the term absolute rights. Yeah, so absolute rights are the prohibition of torture or prohibition of slavery, you know, or no punishment without law, understand, or prohibition of discrimination. Yeah, so these are very good, very good examples of absolute rights. Okay, what about this one? Derogative rights. You know, we can call them flexible human rights because sometimes they can be restricted. They just simply, for example, the current time is a time of quarantine, you know. Due to the virus, we are not allowed to go everywhere as we want and to visit all of the, you know, joyful places that we want. Understand? So it means that our right to movement is restricted, but it's restricted on very understandable basis. Yeah. So it means that right to movement, it is a right that belongs to the second group. Yeah. So it's a right that can be restricted. Yeah. Excuse me. I need just to switch slide. Okay. So very good samples of civil rights. So there's ancient rights. It's over here. In history, they had been recognized earlier than the other types of rights. These are the negative rights because, you know, we have obligations like negative and positive obligations. Negative obligations are the obligations that doesn't require people or doesn't require state to do something actively. Just refraining from violations, it's enough for negative rights, understand? What about the positive rights? The positive rights are the rights that need to be implemented actively. It's kind of rights that should be placed on the states very actively. That's it. That the reason of being positive right. Let me try to add my own video here. I'm very worried about this because I really wanted you to create kind of face-to-face communication. I don't know what to do else. Anyway. So the civil rights are based on the freedom of personality. Yeah. Very good samples of civil rights are the right to life. Very interestingly, in Azerbaijan we call it right to life, and the translation is yaşamak hüququ. But you know, in English, we have two different terms. To live as a verb. So to live means yaşamak, you know, but the official name of the right is right to life, hayat hüququ. So just keep in mind to call it as hayat hüququ in Azerbaijani, because it doesn't mean yaşamak. Life is a noun, not a verb, understand? What about honesty, you know, right to dignity, yeah? And then we have right to inviolability, yeah? So it means privacy, something like this, you know. No one is permitted to violate the independence. Yeah, no one can touch, you know, the other person, something like this. It's the same for the inviolability of houses. Yeah, it's the same for national identity. Each person has right to freely choose its national identity, national belonging. It's about right to movement, you know, right to settle, yeah. And it's again about freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, yeah. I need to just note that international human rights law, they have very interesting language. For example, you know that the term vicdan in Azerbaijani, it's translated as conscience, understand? Yeah, right to thought, it's fikir azadlığı. Conscience, and you know the meaning of right is not has nothing to do with your with your honesty. Its meaning is that everyone has right to freely choose its religion or belief. Yeah, we call it freedom of conscience. Yeah. The civil rights, and the second one is political rights. Okay, so these political rights are based on the political situations. You know, they are the very roots of democracy, and they are used very actively in our social lives. They are very element of the political participation. Yeah. So very interesting one is right to participate in the governmental decisions, right to participate in governmental activities, yeah, and it is a very right to choose and to be chosen. Freedom of expression, everyone has right to freely express. Excuse me. Everyone has right to freely express its own ideas, yeah. Yes, and then we have this one, freedom of association, and we have this one, assembly. Then we have freedom of information. It's about freely getting the information from the governmental organizations. And we have this one, very new one, right to petition. You can ask me a question, what does it mean? Probably you have witnessed cases on Facebook pages or in other social media pages, inviting you to electronically sign a petition. Understand? For example, one of the famous petitions were about introducing a petition to the U.S. Congress and U.S. Senate about official recognition of genocide crimes against Azerbaijani people. The criminals are the Armenians, and they massacred our people. So, and we have prepared a petition on Facebook. Yeah. So the petition is kind of a collective application, something like this. Let me just check your. Okay. So, okay, again, you don't need to ask me questions in English. Just freely, just do them in Azerbaijani. But it's my job, it's my obligation to talk in English. But again, you are not required to think about the English translation of your ideas. Understand? Just feel free to ask me questions. Uşaqlar, Azərbaycan dilində suallarınızı verin. Yəni gözləməyin ki, onları ingilis dilinə tərcümə eləyəsiniz, ya nəsə belə bir şeyə ehtiyac yoxdur. Azərbaycan ilə verin suallarınızı. Prosta mənim dərsimizin dili ingilis dili olduğuna görə mən mütləq şəkildə ingilis dilində bunları izah edirəm. Amma ehtiyac yoxdur siz 2 saat oturub fikirləşəsiniz ingilis dilində nəyin tərcüməsi necə olmalıdır. Okay, the first question is about, can we say the division of human rights into 3 groups based on the development of history of human? Yeah, exactly. Yasemin Khanım, you are right. In terms of history, yeah, we can say that yes. Historical is the first group of human rights, the first generation. Let me get back to my division. It's over here. Yeah. So again, at the first generation, they are issued by the, let's say issued. They are not like issued, but we can use this term. They are prepared by the revolutions. Understand? So the end of Middle Ages in Europe. Yeah, that's a very starting point of civil and political rights. This one, the social rights or economic rights, they started later in the period of Cold War. Understand? In the period of economic crisis, starting from 1960, it could be like this. And later, in early 1990s, we started to talk about the global environmental problems, the climate change, freedom from poverty, and then we started to talk about the freedom of expression, and then right to development. Everyone has right to development as a society. Yeah, it's therefore, yeah, you can write. You are right. You can explain it like this. From the perspective of history, we can yes agree that this division is a product of historical development. Understand? Then the second question: does the existence of human rights show that the state is democratic? If human rights do not exist or are not protected, does the state become a monarchy? Like, human rights is not the only criteria to judge the state. Understand? Like, let me just, okay, Jale Khanım, just keep in mind that human rights is just a criteria for judging a state. Like, for example, in North Korea, they have human rights norms in national law, but still North Korea can be judged as a monarchy, can be judged as a weak developed country. Why? Because human rights are not well respected in North Korea. Understand? And it's the same in Iran. In Iran, if you ask an Iranian politician, he will say that no, in national level we have all types of human rights norms. Yeah, but in reality they are not well protected by the government. Understand? So in terms of this, you cannot say that the existence of human rights norms is enough to say that a state is democratic. A state, in order to be a democratic, a state needs to ensure these human rights, not just having them in legislation. Understand? So existence of human rights on the paper, it doesn't automatically mean that state is democratic. That's the explanation that I want to understand. Okay, what else? Okay, nothing. So let me just get back to this political rights. So I have actually finalized the right to petition. It's over here. Yeah. So economic social rights. Why we mixed them here? Because all of the economic rights has social character, and all of the social rights have economic character. Yeah. For example, like they are the very roots of social economic policy. They are flexible. It's over here. All of states are based on the legislation, but the resources. I'm explaining this one. It's over here. Resources. Their resources are not equal. For example, resources of Uzbekistan is not equal with the resources of France or Germany. Understand? But therefore, the living conditions in different states are different. They are not the same. That's the very root of diversity. Not inequality, but diversity. Yeah. And then the social state, the term social states that we already know from the chapter first of our course book. It's roots of social states that they ensure social and economic rights, and they should ensure this one, social security. So very good examples of economic social rights. Right to entrepreneurship, yeah. Right to business, freedom of business activities, it's over here. Right to entrepreneurship. The second one is the right to adequate standards of living. Right to adequate standards of living includes right to food, right to drinkable water, etc. Labor rights, very famous labor rights. We have labor code, and we have social security rights. It's over here. Yeah. Protection from poverty, it's over here. Protection from poverty. Yeah. So it is a very good one. Then we have welfare. Right to welfare. Right to wealth. We call it like this, right to wealth. It means that all of us have right to all of us have right to be rich. All of us have right to try to have a lot of money, something like this. Yeah? Then don't try to translate this term manzil as flat. It's not only flat, it's about right to settlement, You can settle even in the very good place without walls, without just shelter. Yeah, just shelter. It's enough to claim that this area is your right of settlement. Yeah. And in terms of labor rights, we have this one. Yeah, we have this one because it's a very good explanation of workers' rights against the employees. Not employees, but employers. Yeah. So employers are the persons who employ you. Understand? So in this case, in this meaning, people working for the employers, they have a right to stop the work collectively. Yeah, right to bargain. Yes, they have right to stop the work. They have right to demonstrate their collective disagreement with something. Understand? Yeah, so I think it's enough about the economic and social rights. Unfortunately, I cannot remember the term that I used here. Let me just check it. It happens in my brain because I have limited megabytes. my hard disk needs to be renewed and updated. And I feel a little bit guilty that I cannot find the proper term in English. But let's just give me a couple of minutes. I need just my internet to work. It's not so powerful, it's weak. Oh. Excuse me for delay. Yeah, right to strike. Yeah, I should remember it from the Counter-Strike games that we used to play in our student years. So right to strike. It's very good term. Yeah, right to strike. Yeah, now there is no any questions. So right to strike is this one. Yeah. Again, about the cultural rights, that's a very good example of cultural rights that we usually use. It's right to education, yeah, or right to creative activities, right to participate, yeah, right to participate in cultural life, or the right to use the cultural resources, yeah. It is the right of each person's, the cultural welfare, yeah. What about the very characteristics of these rights? The cultural rights are for our cultural or moral development. They are based on the ideas of multiculturalism, yeah, and they are based on the life of friendship. They are based on the terms of peace and security, yeah, and common life, common settlement, friendly relations between states. And we have this one, new generation of human rights, the fourth generation. Remember this one, please. Let me just get back. Remember these three generations of human rights. Currently, we can talk about the fourth generation, and we call them, the new generation of human rights. They are collective rights, as we said here. Right to development, right to healthy environment, right to peace, right to security, right to participate in informational exchange. So you can argue that most of these rights, for example, right to security or environmental protection, they are introduced in the third generation of human rights too. But nowadays, in terms of information society and transition to knowledge society, we have new generations of human rights, understand? The principle of solidarity and the results of globalization are reflected here. They are raised for the development and they are collective rights as the third generation. The last one that before ending up with the first topic, the last issue that I'm gonna discuss with you is about restrictions of human rights. Yeah, so restrictions imposed on human rights are very interesting because they are based on three criteria. Here are the criteria for restricting human rights. The principle of legality, it means that all restrictions must be imposed by law. They should be found in law. Understand? The second one, they should be needed, they should be important and necessary in societies. And the last one, the level of restrictions must be proportional. Understand? Let me just check for your questions. Okay, another question here, or two questions. Müəllim, konstitusiya dəyişikliklər qəbul edildikdə insan hüquq və azadlıqları ləğv oluna bilməz. Bunu bilirik, bəs əgər məhdudlaşdırmaq lazım gələrsə, dövlət istədiyi qədər məhdudlaşdıra bilərmi hüquqları? Yoxsa bu zaman beynəlxalq müqavilələrə baxılır? Yeah, in terms of restrictions of human rights, it's a very good question. Like, despite of constitution, we have plenty of normative legal acts. And some of these legal acts, they are very useful to find the restrictions of human rights. For example, we have a law on national security, or law on information, informatization, and access to information. We have different types of laws in informational field. So all of these laws, they contain restrictions of human rights, understand? So if we talk about the restrictions, we need to say that constitution, of course, is a fundamental law norm in democratic societies and in national law. But constitution is not the only source of law, understand? Usually constitutions does not contain enough system of restrictions. For example, in Azerbaijan constitutions, restrictions are just on the basis of, they are just criteria for restrictions, on the basis of necessity, on the basis of legality and proportionality. But all of these three criteria, they are explained in special legislative acts, and of course it's over here. And of course international law norms, international treaties are very strongly taken into account while talking about the restrictions, understand? Especially as the case law of the European Court is very relevant in this regard. And the last question is about the meaning of flexible rights. In Azerbaijan we call them elastic hüquqlar. So just let me turn back to this differentiation. Like we have, it's here, we have absolute rights and we have the rights that are derogable rights. What does it mean? I'm explaining again, absolute rights are the rights that there is no any permission, no any ground, or no any explanation for their restrictions. For example, prohibition of torture, it's over here. Prohibition of torture, it is very absolute right and there's no any ground to restrict it. And it's the same for the prohibition of torture, prohibition of slavery, and no punishment without law. It's also very good to explain absolute rights. But what about the elastic hüquqlar, the flexible rights, derogable rights? They are the rights that can be derogated. They can be derogated in terms of in the situations of emergency or in the situation of quarantine, like we are suffering from it right now. Understand? So they are the rights that can be, it's over here, that can be, they can be restricted in certain situations. Understand? Let me just check for your other questions. No questions. Just let me try to show myself to you. It's very pity that you don't see me. Okay, anyway. Just anyway. So the restriction system of restrictions, let me immediately finalize my ideas about restrictions. So restrictions, in order to be necessary in society, they need to protect the rights and duties of others. They need to protect the commonly accepted social, moral values, and they need to protect the well-being and security of society. Understand? And in order to, well, well-being and the very term for asayish, it's public order. In order to keep public order and security, you need to protect and restrict human rights. Understand? And the last one is proportionality. So proportionality is a very good principle in criminal law too. When you punish a person, you need to take into account the seriousness, the strict seriousness of the crime or the violation. So the higher danger of the crime leads to a more higher level of restrictions. Understand? So you need to take into account the reasons to restrict human rights, and in order to restrict them, you need to take into account the level of restrictions. For example, let me just explain it on the basis of the current quarantine regime. You see that we're not allowed to participate or to visit places, public places like cafeteria or restaurants after 3 in afternoons, after 3 o'clock. So it means that our right to rest or right to enjoy our lives, it's restricted. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that until 3 o'clock we cannot go anywhere. Understand? So that's the explanation of proportionality. People can do something, but in a restrictive manner. They can enjoy their meals until 3 o'clock if they are in restaurants. Understand? So that's a level of proportionality, because the virus is not so much dangerous as it's in Italy or as it's in Spain or in other European countries. Therefore, we can just take into account the proportionality level. Yeah, I think it should be like this to explain it. Let me just check some other questions. And if you don't mind, I will just close this tab because I have done with this topic. I will just wait for 1 minute. If you have any other questions, if you don't have, let's try to talk about the second one. Yeah. No any questions? Okay, let's talk about this one because we don't have so much time. Yeah, and I also want to give you some time to rest after the next lecture. Okay, so let's talk about this one. I need just briefly explain you all of these ideas that I put in brackets, all of them. Yeah, because, for example, children, why they need special care? Because within a family they can be discriminated, they can be violently punished, or they can be restricted from any types of rights that are unlawful. Understand? Therefore, you need to talk about the children's care in family situations. And also we have people that do not possess any houses. They are homeless persons, and some of these persons are the children. And in order to protect their rights, we need special care by the government. It's the same for the persons, for the children that are very active participants of the crimes. They are actively participating in criminal groups. It's forbidden. And we need to punish them, but while punishing, we need to take into account that they're just children. Understand? You need to take the psychology of children. And it's the same for youth. In social lives, they are fighting for their independence. In the terms of labor, I will say that's a very basic difficulty of youth willing to work. It's a lack of practice. The lack of uh, uh, experience. Usually employers require 5 or 6 years of experience from young people that that simply are just graduates of universities and schools. It's unfair, I think. It's better just to employ them and give them some possibility to gain experience. But it's very unfair to require from youth in a high level or very high uh, high level of experience or very long years of practice from the graduates of universities. Understand? It's unfair. I think it's a violation of human rights of youth. In terms of family, the youth usually want more independence. They usually require individual rooms for their own life. Yeah, they need their own walls, something like this. And it's understandable. In terms of women, I'm not going to talk about women's rights because you know that discrimination within families, and we have domestic violence, discrimination in terms of labor. Some women are members of the criminal groups. Yeah, they are just engaged in criminal activities. Yeah, very interesting one is this one, national ethnic minorities. Their rights are very sensitive because they are living in rural places where you don't have enough resources for high level of life conditions. Understand? And therefore their social security is under danger. I'm not talking about Azerbaijan, it's just general ideas that people living in rural places usually require very, very high level of attention. Yeah. And the high level of attention should be demonstrated against elderly people. Elderly people are away from the social activities usually. They are away from active labor and active working conditions. Therefore, they sometimes feel that they are excluded from the society. And you don't need to let them think like this. You need to stop their how to say it, separation. You need just to include them to the society. You need to take care of them. Understand? And then disabled persons, or in my terms, persons with intellectual or unusual intellectual or physical development. Yeah, because not all of them are in negative side. For example, we have so many scientists, so many famous inventors, so many famous physicians that have kind of physical difficulties, yeah, kind of physical problems, but they used to have very high level of intellect, understand? Or what about persons with Down syndrome, or the persons with other types of syndromes? They still are the part of societies, yeah. And persons who are in prisons, they are the active participants of the society too. Therefore, we need to talk about the human rights protection in prisons. Yeah. And the last one, why I put here, it's Citra, because all of the societies all over the world, each of them can have their own special groups of population. There's a special group of populations. Understand? I think it's enough to talk about general groups of rights. Let me check for your questions. No any questions? So let's start with this. Why we decided to talk about special groups? Because their rights are usually more violated than others. And the second one is about their needs, They are restricted more than the others from the social life. They need more care, and some human rights especially belong to them. Especially belong to them. Again, about organizations of human rights in international level that are engaged in the protection of these certain groups of rights. The first one is over here, that you already know, it's United Nations. And the second one is the Council of Europe. That's very useful for Azerbaijan too, because Azerbaijan is a European country and it is a member of the Council of Europe. As European Union, it's a union of European states. Although Azerbaijan is not very member of this organization, but still it has very good cooperation links with the European Union. And the last one is Commonwealth independent countries. So CIC countries, we call it like this, Müstakil Devletler Birliği. So the organization of former Soviet Union states. Yeah. In America, in Asia, and in Africa, we have other international organizations dealing with these rights too. Checking for the questions, no any questions. Let's get back to the women's rights. In United Nations level, we have the Committee on Women's Rights, and we have the convention about the political rights of women. It's here, and we have the convention on the prohibition of all types of discrimination against women. Yeah. Also, we have this one, Beynəlxalq Əmək Təşkilatı, International Labour Organization. It deals with the labor rights of women. For example, women are prohibited for night works, understand? And it's the same for the Council of Europe. Yeah, they prohibited any violence or domestic violence against women. However, in the European Union, you cannot find any special conventions dedicated to the women's rights. Most of them are just recommendations. The child rights is the same. We have very famous, in Azerbaijan we call it just very simply UNICEF. Yeah, it's a children funds of United Nations, but it's very useful in terms of protection of child rights. We have the 1924 Declaration about child rights, yeah, and we have a Child Rights Committee. It's over here. The Committee for the Protection of Child Rights. In terms of International Labour Organization, we have conventions that are against the child labour or forced child labour. In European Union, we have very good case law of the European Court of Human Rights. Yeah. A very good case law about the European Court of Human Rights, and we have these two conventions. Yet, in the European Union, in terms of EU level, we don't have any special document about child rights. Unfortunately, I don't know why, because EU has EU Social Charter, but this charter basically is about the labor rights, understand? Social rights, but not about the child rights or women's rights. It's interesting. The youth rights, so persons from 14 to 29-year-old. Yeah. The special programs of the United Nations, Council of Europe, and European Union. It's about, the very key word here is about juvenile justice. So juvenile justice, what does it mean? In Azerbaijan we call it juvenile adliye. Juvenile justice system is a system of law enforcement bodies only dedicated to the issues of youth and children. For example, in Azerbaijan, in police system, we have a special inspector. We call it child inspector, uşaq inspector. It's also a policeman, but its basic obligations are about protecting child rights in his territory. Understand? And of course, we should talk about gender equality too. Any questions so far? I don't know any questions. So let's get back about the minority rights. So the minority rights, finally, you can find a charter of the European Union about regional languages and minority languages. It's over here. Minorities in Azerbaijan are basically from Dagestan people, but in other places we have minorities too, like in south of Azerbaijan, you know. In United Nations level and the Council of Europe level, it's the same about the protection of minority rights. The very rights of minorities that are protected at a high level, in a high level, they are the rights of freely participate in societies, right to integrate. Peoples with disabilities, especially in terms of labor rights or in their daily life situations, or they're just simple movements, they can be restricted to move somewhere, and you need to take care of them. Here we need to talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 agenda. We call it like this, agenda. It's about the sustainable development, and here you can find some. Okay, I will try to show you this sustainable development goals because it's very interesting. And we have a website about literature in Azerbaijanis that you can use very freely. Let me just remember it. If I'm not mistaken, it's just undp.us. So let me check it. Yeah, it's over here. So the United Nations Development Programme and its website in Azerbaijan, it can provide you sufficient information about here. It's about sustainable development goals, their history, and by the way, it's very good topic for the bachelor thesis if you want to. So the implementation of sustainable development goals in Azerbaijan, it's very good to talk about the sustainable development goals and their implementation. It's very useful. So we have some 17 goals. Some scholars claim that we have 19, but officially we have 17 goals. It's no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, and so many other requirements that can be transformed to human rights too. For example, in terms of climate action, we have right to live in safe conditions, right to environmental protection, but it's about the clean energy, understand? What about quality education? It's about lifelong education as a quality, high quality of education. So zero hunger, it's about right to food and water. No poverty, it's about right to work, right to adequate payment, understand? So what I'm trying to say, it's like acceptable to talk about the transformation of all of these 17 goals. If I'm not mistaken, it's a topic of individual work of one of you. I cannot remember immediately who should be the author of this individual work, but it is a very good topic for you to develop it to the thesis. No any questions? So let's turn to the persons who are derived from liberty. The persons that need to be protected in terms of human rights, although they had committed crimes and they are sent to prisons. In terms of this, we have a very good idea. It is over here. The United Nations rules, the minimum standards of rules for the treatment of prisoners. Yeah. So these ones are addressed to persons, to the state governmental representatives in the areas of prisons, in the area of the Ministry of Justice, workers, etc. Penitentiary rules, it's over here. You can find enough information in terms of penitentiary rules in the course book. And another issue is about the code of conduct for the officials working in law enforcement bodies. It's also issued by the United Nations, and it's also very relevant for the not for the workers of prisoners, not for the workers of prisons, but also for the whole system of law enforcement bodies, to talk about the rules of the United Nations. Okay, I think it's enough for current discussion. I will try to show you myself again, because it worked yesterday, it worked today early in the morning, but it doesn't work right now when it's highly needed. I don't know why. Yeah, I think I will ask any of my friends to correct the situation, but not right now. Okay, then I will check the terms of questions. Okay, the question sərbəst işlə bağlı dediyiniz hissəni aydınlaşdıra bilərsinizmi? Hə, siz deməli əsas sərbəst iş məsələsinə qulaq asırdınız. Qoy izah eləyim bir daha, problem yoxdur. So I was talking about the individual works of students. You know that I delivered individual works to each of you, and the issue is that how to say it, one of the questions can be about the sustainable development goals. I don't know whose one is this, but definitely one of the individual work topics is about the sustainable development goals, or the right to sustainable development. So in this regard, the UNDP that I've just demonstrated to you, this website, it contains enough materials both in Azerbaijan language to understand the question, to understand the topic, and therefore I'm just highly recommend you, someone who wants to do a master thesis or bachelor thesis in this regard, to visit this website. And that's all that I want to say you in terms of yeah. Azərbaycanda hate speech geniş yayılıbmı? Bu barədə hansısa qanunların mövcudurmu? We don't have a direct law on hate speech, because it is kind of a legal term, but hate speech is included to the legal norms of other legislative acts. Within the norms of other laws, you can find enough content about the freedom of expression, for example, is a very good one. Hate speech is actually the prohibited form of freedom of speech and freedom of expression, understand? And if you talk about the digital hate speech, then you need to find a law on freedom of information, or law on informatization and access to informatization and access to information. Yeah. So again, direct law only about the hate speech, it's not for Azerbaijan, but you can find enough recommendations of the Council of Europe and the United Nations in this regard too. Okay, what about hate speech? Is it legal in Azerbaijan? Of course no. Of course no. Hate speech is not legal in any of states. It's prohibited. So hate speech, it's absolutely prohibited. For example, in our criminal law, we have defamation. Yeah, in civil law, or excuse me, in administrative law, we have terms of special articles of insult. Insult, humiliation of people. I mean, using bad words, insult. So in this regard, of course, it is very useful to analyze the administrative court and say, have you heard anything about the label? Yeah, criminal punishment for label. Just Google it. Yeah. So hate speech is a very general term and it has different types. For example, defamation or label. It was a blasphemy. Blasphemy is also the hate speech in terms of religion. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say, hate speech is a general word, and we don't have a law on hate speech in Azerbaijan, but we have so many articles of law, of course, constitution also, that indirectly, not directly, but indirectly prohibits the types of hate speech. And again, don't ever think that hate speech is legal in Azerbaijan. Of course it's not. Just keep it in mind. And you're welcome. Yasemen Hanım, of course this website is very useful for me. It was useful too to prepare the slides, because one of our future topics is about the sustainable development goals. And again, it was very useful for me, and I wish it will be useful for you too. It's just a commonly accepted website for importance. Okay, do you have any other questions? If you have, I am still here to answer them. And if you don't have, I just would like to just say thank you very much. It was a very warm welcome of 21 persons participating in this online lecture. And I will do my best to conduct with you regarding the future topics, I mean. And then, of course, we need to talk with your class representatives to talk about the reasons of our future discussions and the arguments for our future topics. Okay, so again, thank you very much. We have made very interesting discussion. Although not all of students participated actively in these answers and questions in this chat, but still it was very useful for me to know the basic areas of your and of course of my interest. Again, thank you very much. Firavan Hanım da teşekkür eləyir. Thank you very much, Firavan Hanım. Okay, see you later. Best of luck to each of you. Thanks a lot. Thanks. Bye.